Hey there, guys. It is Christian Walsh with Wire Associates, and it's time for another live stream. We're looking forward to this one. It is a big deal because the eviction moratorium in LA City has been over for a while. The LA County eviction moratorium is over. So there are a lot of questions out there, and we're going to run through a few, and we can't wait to get your questions here in the chat. So go ahead and start posting those questions right now. We're going to run through some information, kind of answer a few questions ahead of time, and then we are going to go ahead and dive into your questions. So first things first, a little bit of housekeeping. Number one is we can't give tax or legal advice, but for the most honest and up-to-date real estate advice, subscribe to this channel. So make sure you tune in here. We're going to continue to bring updates about Los Angeles and Southern California and all of California for eviction and landlord-tenant regulations. Today, we don't have Michelle in the background, unfortunately. She is on an exotic vacation, and we hope she's having a lot of fun. But we are blessed to have Carlos. He is your digital media guy. You're going to see him in the comments, and he's there monitoring and making sure everything works out. He's going to help keep it clean in the comments. So we hope you guys do too, and he'll be there helping out. So welcome, Carlos. We appreciate your help, and we look forward to more collaboration in the future with him. So without further ado, let's start diving in. Let's start talking about some of the things I've been wanting to dive in and talk about and answer your common questions. We have quite a few questions. Let's go. We're going to go back to our dates. And this is very important. There have been some changes. Of course, look, give me one more chance here. All right. And let me make this larger so we can see this. So we've gone through this a few times. We're going to continue to go through this because this is very important. So we're starting with LA City, the important dates. Nothing has changed since February 15th when I revised this. The big dates in here. So for LA City, the eviction moratorium actually ended January 31st, and some big things happened, namely that you could basically take advantage of owner move-in. In LA City, during the eviction moratorium, during those protections, there was no way for an owner to move into their own property. That has since changed, and we're going to talk about that later on. We're going to talk about some of the differences between LA City and LA County and where some of the confusion is. So one other difference between LA City and LA County is the unauthorized pet or person. In LA, if another tenant moved in, or the tenant went out and got a pet or a couple of pets, that was, even if the lease said they couldn't, the landlord was not able to terminate, was not able to evict for those things. Now in LA City, they still can't. So it'll be until February 1st, 2024, before a landlord in LA City can evict for an unauthorized pet or person. It will require a 30-day notice at that time. You will see the difference when we get to LA County. The other big thing, paying back rent, let's wait a minute on that because we're going to go to that in a second. Let's go to the next slide to show you LA County. Now, listeners and subscribers to my channel know that what happened was LA City's eviction moratorium ended and it fell into LA County's eviction moratorium. So we had to wait as a landlord, you had to wait until after April 1st, which we're now beyond, in order to be able to be outside of the eviction moratorium. So here's one of the major differences here, as we just talked about. For an unauthorized pet or person in LA County, outside of LA City, so anything that's not in LA City, but it's still in LA County, the landlord can move forward with a notice to terminate tenancy, but they have to give a 30-day notice as well. But that starts now. So that's already going on. So if you're in LA County, you're a landlord who has a tenant who moves some other folks in or moves some pets in and it's against the lease, that landlord can move forward. So that's important that the tenants understand that as well. So the other big thing that is now going on that's important to understand is there are no more protections for renters who have not paid rent. So it doesn't matter why you're not paying rent at all. There are no more protections. So it's the fact that you got COVID and can't go to work is not a protection anymore for a tenant. So that's important to understand, that right now landlords can move forward with a notice for non-payment of rent. And it is a 3-day notice. So if you don't pay rent in April of 2023 or going forward as a tenant, you should expect to receive a 3-day notice to pay or quit for that. And that's for April 1st going forward. Now, the other thing that we keep getting a lot of questions on is back rent. So there's some differences between LA City and LA County as far as paying back rent. But at the end of the day, it's important to understand back rent that is due before the end of the eviction moratorium. So this is March or before, March of 2023 or before, the landlord is going to have to give a 30-day notice for that. And the landlord, it's going to be complicated is the short answer. And I've talked to attorneys about this, and I've received questions about this, because tenants still actually have time to pay that money back. So here in the notes, we can see that in LA County, a tenant has up to 12 months to repay past due rent. So if a tenant missed March of 2023, they have until March of 2024 in order to pay that rent. So a landlord could potentially move forward with the 30-day notice for that March 2023 rent, but the tenant could go ahead and prove that it's due to COVID, and then the landlord is going to have to wait. So it's a very gray area, very strange time to be moving forward for evictions for non-payment of rent that are before April of 2023. And then here, going to LA City, it says here, rent owed from March 1st, 2020 to the September 30th, 2021. Tenants have until August 1st, 2023. The interesting thing there, and this is why landlords are going to have to talk to an attorney, in some cases, it's very difficult to recover any back rent that's over a year old. And this is essentially called COVID rental debt. It's not really rent. So it's very complicated. So landlords do not move forward with any 30-day notices for back rent. And tenants, make sure you reach out for help if you receive any notices for back rent. And then we can see here the rent owed from October 1st through January 31st of 2023 in LA City, tenants have to pay back by February 1st, 2024. Now, because LA City falls into LA County after that, a tenant who misses February or March rent in LA City for 2023 would fall into the LA County protections. Isn't this nice and confusing? And they would have a year to pay that back. So again, the moral of the story there is to basically landlords, you need to reach out and talk to an attorney, and renters, you need to make sure that you discuss with an attorney if anybody is trying to give you notice. Wow, these comments are already coming in. Like all these questions, this is great. And I see some questions already related to back rent. So let's go ahead and keep on moving forward. We're going to dive into a couple of quick questions that came in before. And then I want to go to the pages, the LAHD and the LA County pages to run through some stuff, because there's a lot of important stuff in there. Thank you for your patience. I am still learning how to do this with a live stream. Thankfully, I've got Carlos in the background. He's going to protect me as best he can, but there's only so much he can do. So let's take a quick look at these comments here. So this is from Shirley. Shirley asks, my property is in Inglewood. Can I start charging late fees for late rent now that the LA County eviction moratorium is over? So Shirley, thanks for your support. I appreciate you watching all my videos. I've seen you. You've been around for a while, so thank you for that. The short answer is yes, you potentially can start charging late fees for rent that's missed going April 2023 and forward, but it's not an easy answer, as none of these are. You have to look and see if there is a local ordinance, and Inglewood has an ordinance related to the RSO. They have their own ordinance. So you're going to want to reach out and see if you can actually charge a late fee because Inglewood may prevent that. So at the statewide level, late fees can be charged. Remember, AB 2179, which is the statewide protection, that basically after July 1st of 2022, landlords could move forward with evictions. There were no protections at the statewide level. Los Angeles's protections, as we just showed you, were in place further. So that you couldn't charge late fees under the LA protections, but now you can, but you need to figure out exactly where you are and whether you have essentially local ordinances in place to prevent it. So never an easy answer to these questions. All right. So Ava, so this is a great question. I'm confused on the LA County no fault evictions. I thought that was being extended except for qualified owner move-ins. And Ava, I understand why you're confused. And this is a good segue to go into the LA County site to see what is going on at that level. So let's go ahead and take a look there. Okay. So LA County's website here, basically, I have a link below, or I'll have a link below, or Carlos, maybe you can put a link to this. If not, it'll be in the description. So this is the LA County Tenant Protections Resolution page. This has continued to be updated throughout. It's been an amazing resource. And here, if you scroll down, here is where it talks about who is protected as of April 2023 moving forward. And it's an interesting thing in Los Angeles County. LA City is outside this. We're going to talk about LA City because they have a just cause for eviction ordinance that supersedes this. But LA County, if you deferred your rent between July 1st and March 31st of 2023, you have protections according to this website where the only way that a landlord can terminate your tenancy is for owner move-in, and they have to follow all these other steps. We've done a video on this. There's a lot involved with owner move-in in LA County. So what this does is, one way to look at it is it's almost like punishment for those who did pay their rent because they don't have these protections. So according to LA County's website, you are protected from other no-fault terminations of tenancy, other reasons, if you missed your payments on your rent only between July 1st, 2022 and March 31st, 2023. So if you don't fall into this category, so you paid your rent on time, you can, and you are in certain properties. So you're in a condo or a town home or a single family home, not RSO, and it is exempt from AB 1482, which is the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, the statewide law. If you are exempt from that and you've been given the exemption language, in LA County, your landlord can terminate your tenancy through no fault and doesn't need to give a reason and doesn't owe any relocation assistance. So I know this is very confusing. That's why if you receive any notice at all as a tenant, you're going to reach out for help immediately. And here, this is to answer another question that some folks have been asking me. And I brought this up in the last live stream because I heard this at the LA County Board of Supervisors meeting. And that was, there is rental assistance for tenants that you can request from Stay Housed LA. I had subsequent questions where people called in and they said the people there didn't know anything about it. I get it. It's tough to get answers. But right here on this site, it says, if you receive a notice to pay or quit from your landlord, reach out to DCBA at this number or visit Stay Housed LA to see if you qualify for free legal assistance. We talk about that a lot. If you're a tenant and you need help, reach out here. Short-term rental assistance. There it is right there. And for help understanding your rights and access to other resources. So this stayhousedla.org does have some money for tenants. So if you're having trouble paying April's rent, make sure you reach out for help as a tenant and make sure that if you receive a notice to pay or quit, whether it's a 3-day, 30-day, or even if it's a notice to terminate tenancy, reach out for help to understand your rights. So that's important. I wanted to point that out. All right, we're going to switch to the LAHD site because I want to run through there, and then we're going to get to your questions because they're coming in hot and heavy. Thank you guys for asking great questions. So let's see what LAHD has to say. Wrong one. Let's see. See, I told you guys. Carlos, you need to take over on this next time. All right, where are we? Oh, here we go. Okay, so here's LAHD. Get that out of the way. Another great resource and lots of good information here. So this is where you're going to go as a landlord or tenant to learn about basically what's happening now that we're in after the eviction moratorium. Talks about non-payment of rent and evictions here. Talks about back rent, when it must be paid. But here's the more important thing. It talks about the city's just cause eviction protections ordinance. This has changed everything in LA City. During COVID, those were emergency renter protections that were put in place. The inability to evict was an emergency renter protection. These are permanent renter protections. They go beyond COVID. So we are now into the just cause for eviction ordinance. Also called the city's just cause eviction protections ordinance. Same thing. And what it means is that there are very limited reasons that a landlord can terminate a tenancy in LA City. So if you're at fault, which means as a tenant, the tenant has done something wrong. So for example, you're running a meth lab out of your unit or you're not paying rent. Those are at fault reasons that a landlord can move forward with a termination. The new ordinance now limits the list of no fault. We talked in LA County, certain properties, a landlord can terminate a tenancy and give no reason. Well, in LA City, if you're going to terminate a tenancy, you're going to have to give a reason, and it's going to have to be one of the very few reasons. So you can do owner move-in. That would be one reason. But what's important for landlords to understand, if you do owner move-in in LA City, that you're going to have to live there for at least 2 years as a landlord before you can potentially sell that property. The other important thing here is to understand that this has been expanded to literally just about every property in LA City. So we're talking about condos, townhomes, single family homes. We're talking about stuff that's every price point. So there could be a home that's being rented out for $200,000 in a fancy neighborhood in LA City. They fall under this as well. And a landlord is going to have to follow these rules. We've done other content on that. We're going to do another live stream specific to that. And I'll probably answer a few questions here because there's always a lot of questions. Very important. One more thing before we go back. Actually, there's a few more things. So the protections notice, the renter protections notice that must be posted. That needs to be posted to all LA City rentals. So you download that here. The other thing you have to do is you have to, as a landlord, incorporate that into the lease for properties going forward in LA City. So definitely make sure as a landlord that you're aware of this, or hire somebody who knows how to do it like we do. The other important thing, and we just released a video on this, economic displacement. If a landlord gives more than a 10% in rent increase for certain properties in LA City, and by certain properties, they have to be exempt from AB 1482. If the rent increase is more than 10%, the tenant can decide to move out before having to pay the rent increase. If they decide to move out, then the landlord owes them money, and this chart breaks it down. Then the other big thing is evictions for non-payment of rent in LA City have to meet certain dollar amounts now. So you can't just evict because somebody owes back rent of $500. You have to meet certain thresholds, and that's going to be important. Some folks are under these thresholds. It's based on fair market rent per bedroom. So it isn't necessarily what a landlord's charging and may not be what you're paying as a tenant. Okay, let's dive into some questions. Okay, you guys are... Well, good to see you. I see some regulars. I see All Night here. All Nighter, thanks for coming, bud. I see Gigi. Gigi's my daughter. We'll just answer your question first, Gigi. All right. Why do you like doing YouTube? Well, Gigi, thanks for your great question, and thanks for tuning in. Gigi has her own channel, Gigi's World of Gigi. And the reason I like doing YouTube is because I enjoy answering questions. I enjoy helping landlords and tenants out there. And I enjoy showing you what you can do on YouTube as well. That's part of the fun for me. So moving on. Thanks, Gigi. I appreciate that. Diane, good to see you. All right. Carlos, thanks for commenting. All right, let's get into some questions. Okay. Let's see what we got here. All right. Nella Knight. Haven't paid rent for up to March 31st, 2023. Still have time to pay back. Can't pay as of April 1st, current rent, but it's under the market threshold. Can a landlord evict or wait till next month? So great question, Nella. Very sorry you don't have the funds to pay rent. As mentioned, reach out to stayhousedla.org because they do have some funds there to potentially help out. So you're going to want to do that. If you are in LA City and you're under those fair market rent thresholds, then no, you can't be evicted for April. If you're in LA County, then that's not as relevant. It doesn't matter there. It's LA City where that matters. So just understand that. And yes, the landlord would have to wait until you've exceeded that threshold before they can do that eviction. All right. There's going to be a lot of questions related to that. Leo, what if a tenant only paid half the rent? Do I have to wait for the market threshold? Yes, in LA City, you're going to have to wait for the market threshold. And this brings up another point. And that point is that in many cases, talk to your attorney, landlords. You really shouldn't accept partial rent. During COVID, it was understandable to accept it. In fact, it was required at one point in time that you were supposed to accept 25%. But now, as a landlord, you may not want to accept partial rent because it could keep you under that threshold and allow or prevent you from moving forward with the 3-day pay or quit. So that is an important thing to discuss with your attorney. Okay, here we go. Alec, how you doing, bud? What is the average cost and duration for a senior to evict using owner move-in in LA for a 3-bedroom single-family house? And is there a requirement for the owner to live in the property? Okay, so LA City, yes, there will be an owner. You'll have to live there for a minimum of 2 years in LA City. In LA County, if it is a property that's exempt from AB 1482, it's just a house, and the tenant was current throughout COVID, paid their rent, then you actually wouldn't have to live there for any amount of time. You don't even have to give a reason. You don't have to do owner move-in as an excuse to move in, as long as it's one of the exempt properties and you're not in an area that has a local overlay like Inglewood, like we talked about. And then the cost and duration. So if you are in LA City and you own fewer than 4 properties plus 1 on a lot, then you would only owe 1 month's rent to the tenant. You'd have to pay within 15 days or escrow the funds. It would be 1 month's rent. And then as far as the time goes, in either case, in any of these cases, if the tenant has been there for longer than a year, it's going to be a 60-day notice. If they've lived there less than a year, it's a 30-day notice. So hopefully that answers all your questions. All right. So Juan has a good question. He wants to know about rent increases in Los Angeles County as of April 5th, 2023. No easy answer there, Juan. So if your property is under RSO, you are going to want to reach out and discuss with the RSO office to see if you're able to, and to see what that level of increase would be. If you're not under the RSO and you're in LA County, you could theoretically, and you're exempt from AB 1482, and you've given the exemption notice, and you don't have a local ordinance in place, you can increase the rent as much as you want. Just remember that a 10% or less rental increase is a 30-day notice. Anything more than 10% in a year's time is a 90-day notice, okay? So I know it's a long answer to a short question, but you probably can give an increase. You're just going to have to see if there's any special overlays there. All right. Okay, this looks interesting here. Hey, Deborah, you've been renting for 3 years in a COVID program, got a change of tenancy letter in December. So that's interesting. So it was it, and you can answer, and I'll try to circle back. Was it a, and oh, one more point. If we miss any of your questions, or I miss the follow up, if I ask a question, put it below the video, and I'll come back and try to answer it later on, or we'll address it in a live stream later on as well. So the change in terms of tenancy, that is an actual notice that you'd receive, a landlord would give if there's going to be an rent increase, if there's going to be a security deposit increase. I'm going to circle back on that in a minute. If there's any other changes, like suddenly you have to pay for a utility you didn't have to, things like that. You receive the CTT, the change in terms of tenancy. So it's possible that you receive that and there's a change. The other thing would be maybe you received a notice to terminate tenancy. If you are in LA, then the notice to terminate tenancy would not have been valid unless it was owner move-in in LA County. They could do that then, but not LA City. So circling back to the change in terms of tenancy, security deposit, common question we get is how much of a security deposit can be charged, and that is 2 months rent for an unfurnished unit, 3 months rent for a furnished unit. What's important to understand is that as a landlord increases your rent, they theoretically can also ask to increase the deposit so that it matches those numbers. And that was actually a loophole that some attorneys were using to evict during COVID, but the loophole got closed up. They were essentially weren't able to increase rent maybe in certain areas, particularly LA City. And what they did is they would increase the security deposit to get it to match the rent. The tenant wouldn't pay it thinking it was rent, and then they would be evicted. So that was a loophole. Right. Oh, here we go. Let's see what this is. Oh, Deborah, you answered it. Okay, here we go. I should have looked forward. Sorry. Landlord asked for $3,000 more in my deposit. So that's why you got the CTT. You did not pay the additional $3,000. Can they evict you? Rent paid, not deposit. Yes, I actually just answered your question accidentally. Yeah, so make sure that request for the deposit doesn't exceed the 2 months for an unfurnished unit, assuming your unit's unfurnished. But yeah, they can evict if you don't pay that. So you're definitely going to want to reach out and discuss with an attorney ASAP. And then obviously, if you receive any additional notice, you're going to want to get that. Reach out for legal assistance through Stay Housed LA. Thanks, Carlos, for putting up the link to the LA County website. I appreciate that. Okay, Catherine, great question. So what happened to the money supposedly set aside for mom and pop landlords whose tenants didn't pay? Well, we're still waiting on it. It's still not out. And that was the first batch, which was about 5 million. I guess 2 million was going to go to Stay Housed LA, and maybe they're spending that money. Maybe that's where they're using that money, like we discussed earlier. And then 3 million was supposed to go to mom and pop landlords who don't have a mortgage. Well, that's not going to help very many people, unfortunately. So that money I have not yet seen, nor do I see the other 40 million that's been promised. So I haven't seen the 45 million yet. If anybody sees it, please let me know. It's unfortunate it's taking so long to get out there. Let's keep going. Let's see. Okay, Amir's got a good question. Can you please give us a list of what has to be posted? Thanks, Amir. Appreciate you being here, bud. So right now, the only thing that needs to be posted is for a property in LA City. If you have a rental property anywhere in LA City that is, and even includes mobile homes, but I typically don't cover mobile homes. But if you have a condo, townhouse, single family home, duplex on up, you have to get that LA City renter protections notice posted. And that it's odd, I know, it's supposed to be in a common area. So for a bigger building, it's easy. You just put it in the lobby, for example, or put it by the mailboxes. Definitely take a picture of it when it's posted. But for a house or a condo, what do? Well, common area in that case would be next to the front door, maybe next to the garage door. It seems very silly to have paper hanging off the front of your property, but that's what LA City is saying. So you have to do it. So hang it up, take a picture of it. That renter protections notice, if you do not post that, here's how it would play out. So basically, You decide to move forward. Let's say the tenant doesn't pay rent for April of 2023. You give them a 3-day notice. They don't pay, moves to unlawful detainer, get in front of a judge. They can use that as an affirmative defense that you did not give them the renter protection notice. It wasn't posted, and you could potentially lose because you didn't put that notice up. So that's the only one right now I'd say that's important. So make sure you get that posted and take a picture. Okay. Here's a question I do not know the answer to. Is Reseda under LA City? I don't know for sure. I am constantly surprised. When I first moved out from small town Ohio, I lived in LA. I've been tracking LA's market for however long. I'm still always surprised when I like map this out and look at an area and see what's LA City and what's LA County. Now, one quick way to tell is if you pay DWP, Department of Water and Power, then that if you pay your electricity to them or their water, that's LA City. But the other way I use that's pretty accurate is I go to zimas.org, ZIMAS, and that is a GIS system where you can type in the address. I've shown it in other videos. I'll continue to show you that. That's what you're going to do. You're going to take the property address and you're going to put it in there because you need to see if the address is in LA City. One person I've been talking to, their property's in Beverly Hills, but it's technically LA City where it falls. So those are examples. You have to check that address. All right. So thanks for asking. Put the address into Zimas. Okay. I see. Hey, Deborah. So that we're going back to your change in terms of tenancy. So they could ask for more security deposit in December. They didn't have to wait on that. And again, it was a loophole. I like compliments. Jane, you're very sweet. You and your daughter are so adorable. Thank you. I appreciate that. She's a character. I have 4 kids, by the way. Gigi's my youngest. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. My oldest, Bella, is at UC Santa Cruz. She's a banana slug. So let's see. Let's keep going. Oh, here's a good one. Jane, good question. What happens to back rent if a landlord sold the building in January 2023? So that's a great question. I mean, theoretically, the back rent should still be paid to the new owner, but it's worth asking the new owner. And I don't know which side of this you're on. I don't know if you're the tenant or the landlord, and it's irrelevant actually to the answer. But the tenant needs to ask the new landlord if they received any sort of compensation for that back rent. I think it's worth asking that because maybe they worked out a deal between the buyer and seller where that somehow they were getting a spiff in case the rent never came through. So I think it's worth asking. Amir, I remember you posted this last time. I'll put this up. The 2023 threshold is important. Do not rent for less than that. If you, I agree with you, Amir. It'd be great to hit those numbers, but they don't always. Let's go back to those numbers. 1 second here. We'll go back and show the numbers because they're the fair market rents for, well, let's see, for our neck of the woods, essentially. Hopefully you guys can see that. So these seem like low numbers on the higher end, like 3 and 4 bedrooms. Like those are pretty low numbers, especially if you have a single family detached house. Like you can get a lot more now for these rental rates. So it's easy to say in that case that definitely don't charge less than the threshold. Where it's tough is the efficiency. Like if it's a super tiny efficiency, like maybe it's only worth 1,000. So I get what you're saying, Amir, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I just want to point that out, that it is sometimes difficult to hit those thresholds. If you could, it would be easy. And here's another question that I was thinking about that I'm going to go ahead and answer. Here's a workaround for that, right? Listen to this one and tell me your thoughts. What if your late fee is the number that allows you to hit the rental threshold for the late rent? So let's say it's only rented for $1,200 and your late fee is $400 so that you hit that threshold. And the short answer is I'd say be very, very careful doing that because you have to charge a reasonable late fee. So there's just a thought I had today. Run it by your attorney. And speaking of attorneys, I have a list that I recommend. There's attorneys on there who know what they're doing, but I have a guy by the name of Kenny who has been helping a lot of folks recently, and this is on the landlord side. So if you're a landlord who needs advice, legal advice, because I can't give it, reach out and I can get you Kenny's info. You can contact us. There's a link below to contact us for Kenny's info. He knows his stuff when it comes to LA County and LA City. If you're a tenant who needs legal assistance, remember, stayhousedla.org is where you turn. Okay, so Romaine is asking, can you be evicted if you refuse to sign a completely different lease after 25 years to a new landlord if you're under RSO and you haven't violated your original agreement? Romaine, I'm going to say no. So you can be evicted if you don't sign a lease that's substantially similar to your most recent lease. So that is an at-fault reason to terminate a tenancy, to evict. But it's been 25 years in your case. I don't think that's reasonable, and especially if the terms are dramatically different. So I would talk to an attorney about that. And then going back to Stay Housed LA and getting help from Stay Housed LA, if you receive a notice, you're more likely to get help than if you're just calling up with a random question. So I'm telling you, Romaine, to reach out. You may not be able to get assistance, but if you receive any sort of 3-day notice to cure or quit or 3-day notice, definitely reach out for help and stay on the line until they can help you. All right, let's see. Okay, living authentically. You've got a ways to go if your rent's $650. It depends on what unit size you're in, but it would be about $1,533 for an efficiency if you're in an efficiency. So you have to miss 3 months before you could have before they can move forward with an eviction. The one thing I need to get clarification on in this, to be perfectly honest, and I need to talk to Kenny about it. I haven't talked to him about it. I talked to a bunch of other stuff. What do you do in the case of bedrooms if you're renting a bedroom in LA City? So that's an important question, because those numbers that we see in that threshold are based on the number of bedrooms. I mean, do you go by the one bedroom if you're in a bedroom? So we'll have to get clarification from Kenny, and it's brand new. It could be tested in court. Yes, Andrea. Yes, you can ask another $3,000 for deposit. You can ask for up to 2 months for security deposit. Let's keep going. As long as it's under 2 months total, what you have plus 3,000 has to be less than 2 months rent for unfurnished. Okay. This is let's see, Mr. 527. You paid February rent because you were told you had no protection by the landlord. And then March got the notice you were protected. Any chance in recovering February rent? So it sounds like you're in LA City and LA City fell into LA County. No, short answer is you can't recover your rent. You had to pay the rent anyway. A lot of folks ask that if they can. There were a bunch of folks during the toughest days that were using credit cards to make sure they paid all their rent on time and didn't miss any rent, but racked up huge credit card debt. And we're asking, well, hey, can I get the rental assistance funds to help with that? And the short answer was no. They paid their rent and there was no way to get the funds. So Housing is Key could not give them money. All right, let's see what we got here. Keeping it real. Keep it real. What if a tenant owes landlords other accumulated costs, such as parking from the last 2 to 3 years, but pays rent? Do they have to pay it before February 2023 or not? Okay, so rent has a definition. It could be defined in the lease itself, the rental agreement, or it's also defined in the ordinances. So typically rent covers things like any utilities that a tenant is in charge of that they're supposed to pay to the landlord. If they've rented a garage, if there's a fee for parking, that is rent. So if it's in your lease that fee is owed, then that is rent, and you are to treat it as rent. So reach out to an attorney to discuss. My guess is that is treated as rent in your lease, and that you get to be able to go after it like it is rent. So talk to an attorney. We've got another Ohioan, ABO. There's some funny memes. My kids like to laugh at me about the Ohio memes. My favorite. There's a bunch of Ohioans. Good to see Newark. I'm from outside of Cleveland, small town called Chardon. Um, okay, this is interesting. Nayla, you can't call Stay Housed LA and talk to anyone. That's interesting because they have a phone number. At least they used to. I used to give it out. Sign up and make an appointment. That's good to know. Get your appointment. And it's funny because some people are calling. Google it up, like Liam says. Okay. Aha. Good. So Inde, if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. I've Googled and checked Zemus, but if it shows no info on address, then it's not LA City. Great question. So you can also check LA County has a GIS system. I forget what it's called, but it does start with a Z as well. But yeah, Google up. The reason I'm saying it, my son Liam says Google it up. So Google up GIS and LA County, and you'll find their system, and you'll be able to see if it falls under LA County. But yeah, if it shows no info on the address, it's most likely not LA City. Good question. Okay, so here's another good question. ABO, what if the owner filed taxes and use it as a write-off? So here's what's interesting. You can't write off rent that you didn't collect as a landlord unless you have a crazy CPA who says it. I can't give tax or legal advice, but you can't write off rent that you haven't collected. So it doesn't affect, I mean, you still owe it. Let's put it that way. That rent's still owed, but that's if they wrote it off. I'm just curious how they're doing it, and maybe we can have a CPA on. You're from Cleveland too. I see that. All right. Let's see. Good follow up, Jane. You did ask about the background, but the new landlord will not provide any details regarding the terms of the purchase. Yeah, I'm going to say you still owe it. It's unfortunate that they're playing that game with you. They should tell you whether that back rent was somehow anteed up. But yeah, theoretically, you still owe it. It's going to be hard. I mean, like we talked about in the beginning, for anybody who's just tuning in, it's going to be hard to collect back rent. It's going to be hard to evict for back rent in LA because of the hoops that a landlord's going to have to jump through. The landlord can take you to small claims court. So remember that. That was introduced about a year and a half ago, I want to say. So a landlord can take you to small claims court and potentially get a judgment against you for that. Let's see this. This looks interesting. Same difference. You got served an unlawful detainer for non-payment of rent after we notified the owner of the gas company red tagging the gas meter. Can we get the case dismissed due to substandard living conditions? Yeah, great question. And I get this a lot. And here's what happens from both sides. The landlords and tenants, pay attention to this. So I have talked to tenants who are afraid to report issues with the property because they're afraid they're going to be evicted. Just was speaking with a gentleman who's afraid to report that there's black mold in the property because he's worried that the landlord's going to evict him. Tenants, you can't live in those conditions. Health and safety issues like that need to be taken care of. You have to report them because they're going to get worse for you too. So that's the unfortunate thing, is that there are renters who live in fear of reporting things. So landlords understand that. Landlords don't use a report like the gas company red tagging the gas meter. If you suddenly issue a notice to terminate tenancy after this, or unlawful detainer, it looks like retaliation. And retaliation could potentially have fines related to it. And like Same Difference is asking, potentially could be used as an affirmative defense by the tenant. So that's important to understand. I don't know. The short answer is we don't know. Same Difference, and attorneys aren't going to know. You're still going to talk to your attorney about this, but you won't necessarily know until you get in front of the judge what's going to happen in a case like this. But if there's a bunch of substandard living conditions, it could potentially add up. So good question. And again, landlords, be careful of making it look like retaliation, and especially not just looking like retaliation, like don't retaliate. It's against the law. Okay. Jason, I see you here, bud. Let's see what you got. RSO duplex in LA. You live in one. Can you evict the tenant from the other to have your mom move in if it's the only property you own, and how much in relocation? So all bets are off when it comes to RSO. I'm not an RSO expert. Kenny knows RSL well. So reach out to me, Jason, so I can get you connected to Kenny. The short answer is most likely you will be able to, as long as this is not a protected tenant that's currently in that unit right now. And a protected tenant, for example, would be, and there's different overlays on this in LA, of course, but a protected tenant would be someone who's over the age of 62 and has lived there for longer than 10 years. You're not going to be able to get that tenant out for this reason. So that's where you're going to need to talk to Kenny. So Jason, great question, and reach out to me about that. Okay. I think we've talked about hey, Kelly girl, how you doing? Good to see you. If the landlord issues a 30-day rent increase notice for a certain date, i.e. May 1st, and the tenant and landlord agree to raise rent July 1st, there's more to this. Where'd it go? Is landlord required by law to issue another 30-day notice? I'm going to say no. It's a little gray here, and an attorney would give better advice. I think that original 30-day notice is going to, you'd be able to say that still applies because you guys were kind of working together and the landlord gave you additional time. Theoretically, maybe you need another 30-day notice, but I think you might just have to go with it, Kelly girl. All right, let's see. Let's see what we got here. DZ, is there somewhere that I can get a no-fault eviction for tenants? Landlord here preparing to evict and take property back. Single-family home, not exempt from AB 1482. Okay, crazy complex answer to this, unfortunately. So I'm curious why it's not exempt from AB 1482. Maybe you can give us a reason. Did you rent out a bunch of bedrooms maybe? Because that could potentially, you could lose your AB 1482 exemption. Or did you not give them the exemption notice? That would be another reason you could have lost your exemption. You won't be able to do it. So depending on where it is, and you may or may not be able to move forward with a no-fault eviction. I'd need to know the address. So if you want to reach out, I can give you the address. And if you're in LA City, for example, you could move forward, but it's going to have to be, the easiest ones are owner move-in. You're going to have to live there for 2 years. Or if you're going to sell, owner move-in and the buyer is the one who moves in and lives there for 2 years. That's how we sell some properties in LA City. Then the other thing you can do is you can do a extensive remodel, but that's going to have to follow certain guidelines as well. So reach out and we'll give you more guidance. It will be very address specific for whether you can move forward with that or not. Obi-Wan, you are welcome. Thanks for coming. Oh, geez. All the Ohio people. Kirtland, right next door. Michael, you are. That's funny. That's funny. Chardon High School is where I went. We were the state champs in 94. Now I'm dating myself. I was the captain of the football team. Anyway, I won't go into all that. All right. We've got all-nighter. Thanks, buddy. All right. Okay, here we go. We got our rented. Mine is rented furnished. You rented the house furnished, but they threw all the furniture out in the rain. No notice. That's terrible, Andrea. We have to give back that month of deposit. It's been over 8 years. No, it's whatever's in the rental agreement and the lease. Basically, if in the lease, if it says it was rented furnished, they threw it all out. Number one, yeah, you can still charge the 3 years worth of security deposit because that's what the lease says. And I know the furniture is gone, so theoretically they could push back on that. But they owe you money for the furniture, so you might as well get your 3 months security deposit because you're going to need it to help replace the furniture. So again, that's where the rental agreement, the lease, is important. And you hear me say lease and rental agreement. I use those words together like that. And this is a good segue. Pay attention again, landlords and tenants. A lease is a fixed term. So most often, but doesn't have to be, people move into a new rental and they have a 12-month lease. If that lease is not extended with another lease, it typically rolls into month to month. That lease document is no longer technically a lease. It is now a rental agreement. So I want you to understand that. The other important thing, there's two more important points. One is terminating tenancies. You cannot terminate a tenancy on someone who's on a fixed term lease. If somebody has a 12-month lease and it's month 6 and you say, okay, I want to give them a 30-day notice, 60-day notice, you cannot. It's a fixed term. You have to go all the way through the end of that lease as a landlord. You can offer cash for keys. The tenant could say, yeah, buy me out of the rest of the lease. Give me the 6 months of rent. Yeah, that's possible. You can negotiate that. But the tenant doesn't have to accept it. They have a fixed term lease. From there, it goes into a periodic tenancy. That's a 30-day, it's the month-to-month notice is periodic tenancy. So you can only terminate a tenancy when we talk about terminating tenancies when it's a periodic tenancy month to month. It doesn't have to be month to month. It could be week to week. It just has to be periodic. So hopefully that makes sense. The other big thing, stop Googling up leases, landlords. You need to go to a great source for the latest lease. And you can get that from a real estate agent you know. You can get that from an apartment association. I'm found many of the online resources do not have accurate leases for California and they don't have all the required disclosures, etc. So make sure you turn to a good source for the latest lease when the tenant moves in, and then tune into our channel. Make sure you're subscribed so you know what to add on to it. There's disclosures you needed to give your tenants, like the AB 1482 disclosure. If you haven't done that, you're out of compliance and there could be issues. So I, in fact, recommend you may want to, even if you don't want to put a tenant on another lease, they've been there 10 years, they've been month to month for 9, you can still have them sign a rental agreement. Looks exactly like a lease, but it's month to month. All right. I've hammered that hard. I apologize. I get excited about that. Amir, I don't know the answer to this. Do the small claim records show on their credit report? The small claim, if you got a judgment, it might, but during a certain portion under the different eviction moratoria at the statewide level, it wasn't showing up on a credit report, so it may not. Let's keep going here. Okay, here we go. Nela, seniors and can't be evicted. Elaborate on age restrictions and time in the residence. Great question. So in Los Angeles, under the RSO, so if it's a rent stabilized unit, and then in certain areas, you may be in LA County under the Inglewood rent stabilization ordinance, for example. You have to know exactly where you are. So there's certain protections for seniors, and the shorthand version is that if you're over the age of 62, you're considered a senior for protections. And if you've been there for longer than 10 years and you're over the age of 62, you become a protected tenant in many cases under the RSO. You also become a protected tenant in LA City under the just cause for eviction ordinance. And what it means, it only applies to owner move-in. So this is a relatively recent discovery that Kenny, my attorney buddy, shared with me. This is why you need good attorneys. He dove all in, way beyond what I went into because he's got more experience with this. But he noted that under the owner move-in provision in the LA City just cause for eviction ordinance, that they have essentially slapped on there the fact that it's similar and almost identical to the RSO guidelines in LA City. So for owner move-in in LA City, if the person has been there for more than 10 years and they're 62 and older, the owner can't move in. But what the owner can do a substantial remodel and get the tenant out. The tenant isn't a protected tenant under the owner move-in provision. I'm sorry, that was wrong. Rewind, let's edit that out. The tenant who is 62 years of age and older, who has been there for 10 years or more, is not a protected tenant under the substantial renovation provision in the LA City just cause for eviction ordinance. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, moving on through. I appreciate you guys being here. I love doing these. I'm having fun with this. I appreciate all the support. All right, let's see. Okay, this brings up another good topic here. Hey, Teresa, how you doing? in LA County, you have an emotional support animal. My landlord wants to charge me a deposit and rent. You've been here for 18 years. Is this legal? So the short answer is probably not. Emotional support animals, the laws are complicated, but emotional support animals technically fall under, they're not pets, is the short answer. So you're not supposed to be able to charge a deposit for an emotional support animal. You're not supposed to be able to charge additional rent. But two things. One is talk to an attorney, but two, we're going to be doing a live stream in the future. There is an agent who's in my office, Berkshire Hathaway office. He actually has an emotional, or he actually has an ADA animal himself. So he is going to come on and share updates on this and talk about his experiences having an ADA animal. So it'll be interesting. We'll dive into that. That's a great question. This is a funny, but not funny. Like, this is crazy. You have to ask this, Antonio, and I'm sorry. Can I get evicted for no battery in the smoke detector? No, sir. That is not your responsibility. It's the landlord's responsibility to maintain smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. And even more, to show you all the random stuff that I know and deal with, the state has changed smoke detector laws, essentially. And one of the important changes they've made is that if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you get your smoke detectors, you can't buy a smoke detector that does not have a built-in 10-year battery. Not carbon monoxide detectors. Those are not required to have a built-in 10-year battery, but smoke detectors are. What you need to tell your landlord is let them know, hey, this thing is beeping like crazy. Please get me one of the new, it's not that brand new, it's been around for about 3 years now, plus have the landlord put in a new smoke detector that has the built-in 10-year battery. Those don't chirp. There's no maintenance involved. The landlord needs to put the date on there, and then in 9-ish years, I mean, obviously still continue to test it. The landlord should be doing that. But the 10-year battery lasts longer. You don't have to worry about it. And that brings up another point, that if you get a notice of entry, a landlord is allowed to give you a notice of entry to come in and test smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, check to make sure the water heater's strapped. They're able to show to prospective purchasers. They're able to have contractors come in. Those are all legal, valid reasons. They need to give proper written notice. It's what we do when we have a property listed. We do that, make sure your rights are respected as a renter. But if given proper written notice and you refuse entry as the renter, you put yourself at risk of eviction. That is an at-fault reason to be evicted. So just to kind of flesh this out, Antonio, I know I'm diving in deep here, but if the landlord leaves a notice to come and change your batteries or smoke detector, make sure you let him or her in. So good question. I'm sorry, you shouldn't have to maintain your own smoke detector. Oh, and more smoke detector knowledge. You need one smoke detector in a common area on each floor. You need one in each bedroom. You need one carbon monoxide detector on each floor. So I should have a diagram. This will make more sense. But if you have a 2-level rental, you'd need one smoke detector. So 2-level rental, all bedrooms are up. Let's say there's 3 bedrooms up. So it's a 3-bedroom townhouse, all bedrooms up. Downstairs, one smoke, one CO detector. Upstairs, one smoke detector in the hallway, one carbon monoxide detector in the hallway, and then 3 smoke detectors, one in each bedroom. So you need 5 smoke detectors and 2 carbon monoxide detectors. I'll probably put most of you guys to sleep on that one. All right. Let's see. Did we run out of questions? Hey, Carlos, did I? Okay. I feel like maybe Alec, typical cost and duration for a senior using unlawful detainer in Los Angeles for a landlord. Okay. That's very hard to answer because it's going to depend on a lot of factors. You're going to want to reach out to an attorney and discuss your particular case. If you're moving forward with an unlawful detainer, that would be because the tenant didn't move out, assuming you gave them proper notice before that. So just to throw numbers out there, and these are not quotes, you'll have to talk to the attorney. Usually it'll be around 2,500-ish to 5,000. That will be a retainer to hire the attorney. And it gets more expensive depending on what the renter does, depending on how many court appearances there are. Court appearances are going to have a cost. So it goes up. The more a renter fights, the more expensive it becomes. And then as far as time goes, here's a sample timeline. And again, I should create a diagram on this. But the first thing would be you give the proper notice. So if it's a 3-day notice, 3 days go by. If the tenant doesn't perform, your landlord gets involved. You may have to give another 3-day notice, depending on what it is. But then it can move pretty quickly from there. The unlawful detainer can be filed. The tenant has 5 days to respond. They have 15 days if it's mailed, if it's and not posted at the door. Then it gets in front of, then a court date can be scheduled. So in that scenario, it could be 3 months, let's just say, before you're in front of the judge. If it's a 60-day notice, let's go back to the beginning. If it was a 60-day notice, you'd have to wait the full 60 days, then move forward with this process. So in that case, it could be 5 months before potentially you're in front of a judge. Depends on how busy the courts are, etc. And then from there, if you win, then you'll get the writ of possession. You give that to the sheriff. It's going to be several weeks to a month before the sheriff can come and lock out. So it's a long process is the short answer to it, but I just wanted to run through that. Your attorney that you hire for the unlawful detainer, you're not going to do this yourself. You need to hire an attorney to do this. They will give you their best opinion on how long it'll take based on what they are seeing in the courts at that time, because that's going to shift. I do expect courts to become more backed up as more landlords start to move forward with evictions. So that will affect the duration as well. Let's see. Yeah, all-nighter. Good question. So written notice of entry is a minimum of 24 hours. Yeah. So what I do for notice of entry is I like to give additional time to the renters. So I will give, typically if I can, I'll give 48 to 72 hour notice. There is a provision, and I won't go into it all here, I'll do a video on it, where theoretically you can, if the tenant agrees, you can just give a phone call to the tenant to set up the timing. And this is most often used if property's on the market, for example. But we don't use that. We have a different approach to selling a tenant-occupied property. But yeah, written notice of entry, minimum of 24 hours. And as a landlord, I recommend anything you're doing, unless it's an absolute emergency. If a water heater exploded and there's water running everywhere, like get there. You don't need a 24-hour notice. But anything else, give a 24-hour notice. It's a great question. All right. Let's see. Fashionista. Oh, I'm sorry you didn't know about the live. I got to do a better job getting on there. Yeah, I did. In the beginning, we talked about paying back rent and landlords sending 30-day notices. So you can go back to the beginning of this, but we're going to have to do it again because it's attorneys are given different advice. So your next question, submitted a self-certification every month. Okay. So Fashionista, we'll catch you up to speed. Sorry for those who heard it, but there's several new people on here too. So if a landlord, pay your April rent, Fashionista, and you'll have protections there. You won't be able to be evicted for that. If the landlord is going to try and evict for back rent during this time period, they are going to have to give a 30-day notice. The fact that you submitted the self-certification and you may have to provide proof. I don't know if you provided proof at that time. Don't tell me. You don't have to tell me. But if you can prove it was related to COVID, you would have certain protections. You'd have additional time to pay it back, depending on whether it's LA City or LA County. So you're good, but just pay your rent going forward. And then let's see if LA actually rolls out their $45 million and gets it out there. Let's see. Background here. Laura moved out, but owes $20,000. Yeah, you can go after him. Take them to small claims court to get that back $20,000 if you have a forwarding address, know where they went. Yeah, just because a tenant didn't pay back rent, didn't pay rent doesn't mean they don't owe it. You can still go after them. All-nighter. I agree. Golden rule is still golden. I totally agree. That really, to me, that's fiduciary responsibility as a real estate agent. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Right. So it looks like we're getting close to wrapping up. Holy cow, it's been an hour. That flew by. I'm sure I missed some questions. Carlos, anything I missed? Anything you want to put in the chat? Okay, cool. All caught up. Thank you, sir. All right. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to do lives once a week. We're going to start to vary the topics. So let me know what you're interested in learning more about. We're still going to talk about landlord tenant uh, regulations. Definitely, that's going to be a hot topic. I want to start doing the market updates real that I do. I want to do some lives on that. So if you think that's interesting, let me know. Another thing I've been thinking of rolling out, if you're interested, is talking about what it's like to be a real estate agent, maybe one or two of those. Um, it can be exciting. And then another thing we're definitely going to talk about is talking about helping landlords sell their rental properties. We already do that, but we're rolling out a program in LA City that will be completely turnkey. And renters, I understand you don't necessarily want to hear that we're going to be doing this, but we will be following the letter of the law, which is more than a lot of agents out there will ever do. They don't know the law. We're going to follow the letter of the law. So what the plan is, we're going to have a completely turnkey system, and this benefits LA City landlords, and it will benefit other landlords as more renter protections go into place, where essentially it will be the substantial remodel. Will have a source for funds where they will pay the funds for the relocation assistance for the tenant. They will pay for the legal fees that will be incurred to make sure the paperwork's done correctly, which protects both the landlord and tenant. And then the funds to actually do the remodel will be fronted as well. So it'll be a completely turnkey system. The funds won't be due. All of that money won't be due until the property sells. And because it'll be extensively remodeled, it'll be turnkey, it will sell for more. So this will help out landlords in particular who haven't received funds in LA City for a while, don't have the money to do an extensive remodel. So let me know your thoughts on that. You can leave a comment below on that, or just feel free to reach out personally. Thank you, Carlos, for all your help. Really appreciate it, bud. Gigi, it was good to see you. I appreciate all the regulars coming here. Please spread the word on what we're trying to do. Keep your great questions coming and your support. If you know anybody looking to buy or sell real estate in Southern California, we can help. We have a sales and marketing regional center in Orange County and now LA, but we help in other counties. In fact, we just closed on a property in San Bernardino in Highland. We're super bullish on that market there. Represented the buyer on that. Outside of California and Northern California, we can help as well. So keep your questions coming. I appreciate the support. And thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we want to hear from you.